we as in Jesuits in Britain, were lucky enough to work with Bertie about four years ago. He's an international digital consultant, so he's travelled all over the place and has worked with over 90 charities on over 100 different projects. He specifically works with NGOs on digital transformation and digital projects, and he's been making a lot of forays recently into blockchain and uses that blockchain can have for international NGOs and charities. So he is here with us. He's here with us to share today some of his work, future work, secret work. So we're very happy and appreciative that he has come to share his work with us today. So.
Great, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me. Although I am a digital consultant, I must start with a confession. This is the first time I'm being live streamed. So I'm not that experienced in that. And also, in terms of international, I haven't really traveled the world. I use mostly Skype Airlines, so I do a lot of work on Skype. So I think I need to give you a bit of background. So yes, I'm a digital consultant. Come in. Good morning. So I started working on the internet in my early 20s. So I'm originally from France. You have already spotted my accent. So I'm from Dijon, which is a small town of France. And I started building websites. Are you from Dijon as well? No? Okay. So I started building websites in my early 20s. The truth is I did that because I believed the internet was the future. But at the time, no one else in Dijon was doing websites. And companies I was trying to sell websites to were not interested. They were telling me, why do we need a website? We don't really think the internet is going to work. So it was quite frustrating. Media manager at the time. But my biggest challenge was to convince my colleagues, so internally, convince staff to provide content for the website. And after about 2 years, the challenge was to convince the fundraising team that people would donate online. And one of the frustration I had as a sort of head of digital was that my colleagues didn't really listen to me, but when someone external was telling them what to do, suddenly they were prepared to listen. So that was quite a frustration. So I then moved to another charity called Breast Cancer Care, and I was working in patient services. So when I was there, we were creating web services, discussion forums, live chats. Again, with fundraising, I had to convince them about crowdfunding. They were not quite ready to hear what I had to say, but again, as soon as someone external mentioned it, then suddenly it was good to do. And so I saw basically social media, and I developed social media there when it started. I think Breast Cancer Care was one of the first charities to have a page on MySpace at the time. So after 6 years at Breast Cancer Care, I decided to work freelance for 2 reasons. One I've already mentioned, because I discovered that if you want people to listen, you have to be external. So I thought maybe if I'm external, then people will listen to what I have to do. And I would say about 40% of my job nowadays is to tell charities what they already know with a French accent, but they have to pay to hear it. So because they pay, then they think, oh, we've paid for it. So we're going to implement the recommendations. And the other 60% is actually doing work, hands-on projects. So I've worked with nearly 100 charities now, which when I started working freelance, I didn't know that would happen. But some projects are very small. So about 2 weeks ago, I worked with a small charity on job interviews. I helped them to recruit a digital manager. So I worked with a number of Christian organizations. I helped Christian Aid to choose a CMS. I worked with the Jesuits in Britain a few years ago. I've done a couple of projects with United Bible Societies and Bible Society UK. And currently, I'm working with a charity called Tear Fund, that you may have heard of. So I've been working with them since December. And so what I did initially is to do a series of interviews of staff to understand their skills and how they worked. And now I'm helping them to basically structure the team and to look at how we can structure digital data and technology. How can the departments and the different divisions can work together a bit better? I'm also working with a cancer charity called Maggie's on something similar. So I do that with a few charities, but I'm also working with a French charity called Handicap International. They recently rebranded Humanity and Inclusion. It's quite challenging for me to actually work with a French charity because all my digital vocabulary, I acquired it here. So I don't really speak digital French. So I've got to relearn all the words in French, like bounce rates and... I'm also working on a few blockchain projects that I'll mention later today. And I'm in the process of setting up a charity myself called Blockchain Foundation UK. So today is about blockchain. So could you raise your hand if you have heard at least the word blockchain? Okay, so most of you have heard blockchain, right? Could you also raise your hand if you have ever bought bitcoins or if you are an experience of buying cryptocurrency? Okay, so it sounds like you probably know as well quite a lot if you've done that. So this is a new area. So maybe you could help me if you got additional information. So the plan for today is to tell you what is blockchain because it's been in the news a lot. So by telling you what it is, I'll tell you obviously what it isn't. It's an interesting area because it's at the moment there's a lot of buzz about blockchain. And because I started when the internet started, I don't quite understand the buzz. I mean, I think this is really, really interesting. That's going to change lots of things, but it's not as visually exciting as something like social media where you can interact with people. It's basically, for me, it's like the revenge of the geeks, but you will understand in a minute. I'll tell you a bit more about how it works, and I'll try not to be too technical, but to understand the power of what blockchain is, you need to understand a bit how it works. I'll show you some examples. So when I do that, and that's mostly for people streaming this at the moment, there is one case study that I won't be able to share on the live stream because I haven't got the permission from the charity because it's not live yet, but people in the room will be able to see that and maybe share that with you. And basically then we're going to have a workshop where you will plan your own blockchain project and share, and I'll help you doing that. So let's start with what is blockchain. So blockchain is an open, decentralized, distributed a record, and then the record adds a reference to a location. So if I use an example, it could be that it was my records, and there could be a location, another piece of data could be my wife, for example, and her records. So that's the early days of a database. So then in the 70s, we moved to, well, I wasn't really there, but it moved to relational databases. So we had different tables with different identifiers linking content together. So it could be that I had my name and with an ID number linking to a table with my address. So if I updated my address, it would be in a different table. So it was all different tables. And that's where the word SQL was created to search and create those data sets. So hopefully you're all familiar with all that, you understand the concept of a database. Now in the 80s, it was very similar database, except it was siloed and installed on a different desktop. So on your desktop, you could have something like an Access database where you had all your tables. So that's really the history of a database moving to blockchain really soon. So then we had some networks, and this is basically, you probably know how it works. Your computer is connected to a server. So you will send a query to the database. The server will compile a document, send it back to your computer, so you get like a report, and then you can read the report, or you can save it on your machine. And if you really want to be a bit more geeky, you will understand the need to update your web server or your Drupal website or your WordPress website, because there's like an injection bug, malware, which means someone can actually damage your database and delete the database. Okay, so here comes blockchain. So blockchain will prevent all that from happening. So blockchain is secure, shared, distributed ledger. So let me explain that in a bit more detail. So for me, the most important part is that it's a ledger. So as I said earlier, the database you're familiar with, you can update a record. So you can, I was mentioning the address, you may have your contact details, you go to the database and you update your contact details. With a ledger, and the blockchain ledger, you can't do that. You can't update. You create a new data. So every transaction is recorded. Every piece of information is recorded. You can't go back and delete. So you can only add on top of the, you can add new blocks. So this is why blockchain can be used effectively when you want to keep trace of the record. So that's the first important thing. It's secure, so basically it's using cryptography. I didn't want to go into cryptography because that could be quite long, but basically it's using like an encryption system with different keys to make sure that the data is secure. Because, as you will see, everyone can see the ledger, can see there's a transaction, but you can't see what's written in the transaction unless you've got the key to read it. So it is secure. The other important thing that it's distributed. So if I go back to the example where you had the database on your computer, you could have a colleague with a different database. Now, the fact that it's distributed means that everyone who's part of your blockchain will have exactly the same version of the ledger. So if you add a new record to the ledger, everyone will instantly get exactly the same copy. So if you're using Google Drive for your work and Google Docs or Google Spreadsheets, it's shared, but obviously you can amend it. But that means when you update something on a Google Doc, instantly people are connected will see your update. So it's a bit like that, if I want to be quite simplistic. but there are different copies installed on different machines, and they're all the same. And then it's shared. So that means that you can share it, you can give access to this blockchain system to different people, the people you want. There is also the fact that you will hear sometimes that blockchain is public. So it can be public, so you can have a blockchain that anyone can access, or you can make it private. And I'll explain the difference between a private and a public blockchain. I explain in a few minutes. So basically that's what blockchain is. Blockchain is a distributed, secure ledger. Okay. Do you have any question? Yeah?
How and what is guaranteeing the immutability, and who is doing it? Is that...
Okay, so I'll come on to that in a minute, how it works. I'll explain how it's guaranteed, and because that's a very good question. Yes?
What's the form of a ledger?
Sorry?
What's the physical form or something that I know in the ledger?
Okay, so that's exactly like a database, and I will show you examples later.
Okay.
And you'll say, oh, actually, that looks quite boring. And I'll tell you, the first time I went onto the internet, which I think was 96, because I set up this web company. I didn't have a computer at the time, so I bought a book about HTML, and I thought, this is what I want to do, but I'd never been on the internet. I went to a cyber cafe. I looked at the internet. Oh my God, I've read so many articles about it, and that's quite boring. That's just text. There's no images. So when you look at what blockchain is, basically it's a database, okay? And then you can create a visual interface, but that's just a list of records. So it's like a long table. Okay, you will see an example later. So how it works? So you would have a new file. So the new file would be created a new entry. There's a trusted authority that will validate the transaction, and I'll show you how it works, and then it's written onto the ledger. So if you look at this, it's quite familiar. This is actually how the world is currently operating in terms of finance. So if I look at a credit card transaction, I've got my card, I want to make a payment, I make the payment. But behind the scenes, my bank is talking to another bank or the Visa company, and the money goes through different steps. So this is currently how it works, except in the middle, I've got Visa and my bank checking if I have the money or the credit to make the purchase. So if I look at international wire transfer, it's the same thing. I want to make a payment abroad, but then it's even more complex because central banks have to convert the money. So basically there are quite a few organizations involved to check that I can put money from my bank account to another bank account. So the thing that started blockchain is Bitcoin. So, and this is probably what you have heard of a lot, is Bitcoin. So when Bitcoin was started, I think it's 2009. I think I read something about it, but I was not quite interested because it was branded as basically if you want to buy something illegal. So I wasn't into drugs or guns. I mean, I'm still not into that. So I never bought any Bitcoin at the time because I didn't really see the use of Bitcoin. So it was really promoted as money to buy something illegal. So there's a white paper about what Bitcoin is. So basically, the concept of Bitcoin is transferring money directly from one wallet, so one person to another person, without using a bank in the middle. So I've got money in my wallet, I can send that directly to your wallet. So when the Bitcoin paper was published, actually it doesn't mention blockchain, it just mentioned a chain of blocks. So blockchain is the technology, the framework, the concept that allows Bitcoin and other currencies, cryptocurrencies, to operate. So this is that's the framework. So there is obviously the challenge that's already been mentioned. So if you want to transfer money directly from one person to another person, how can you make sure that the person who wants to send the money actually has the money? If I want to buy something, or transfer money to you, you need to make sure that actually I've got the money to buy what I want to buy. And also, I need to make sure that the money I've got is valid, so it's the same currency. That we're not trading on different currencies. And then for the person receiving the money, they want to make sure that actually I have the funds, and also they want to make sure that when the money is sent to you, that you don't have that I haven't got the money anymore. So I'm giving you the money, I'm not keeping the money. So there are lots of things that are currently happening in the physical world or the outside blockchain that have to be validated. So basically, how can you make sure that I can be trusted? So that's the big issue, and that's called the consensus. So there are different ways of having this consensus. The first one is called proof of work. So what happens in a proof of work is you've got computers who collect a number of transactions, we call them blocks, and they turn them into a mathematical equation. So it's called mining. So you may have heard about mining blockchain. So what it means is you've got a group of people with a computer who will have to decrypt a mathematical problem. The first person to find the solution then says to the rest of the network, I have resolved that equation. So a block is added to the blockchain and the transaction is validated. So it's a group of people who will basically use a mathematical equation to check that you are who you say you are and that you can send the money. So that's the process of mining. So when it's confirmed to the network, then the other miners will check if the funder, the sender, has the fund to send the money, and if the equation you solved is actually correct. So if you've got enough people saying, yeah, this is correct, and when I say people, it's all done by a computer, it's an algorithm. So using your computer was programmed to create that equation and to check that you can grant permission. So then, once everything has been approved, then you can move to the next set of transactions. Okay? And in blockchain, the person or the computer who's resolved that equation will get 25 bitcoins as a reward. So that's an incentive, because otherwise, why would anyone use their computer power to solve a mathematical problem? So the reward is 25 bitcoins. I checked yesterday, a bitcoin was about £6,000, so I think it's about $9,000 US. I think I've got the exact figure on another slide. So that's quite a good reward to do that. There is a problem with proof of work, because at the moment to resolve this equation, it's using your computer power. It's using a lot of power. So there was an article published in March, so just over a month ago, explaining how much it costs to create one new block, how much it costs to do this mathematical equation in different countries. So the cheapest is in Kuwait, where it costs about $1,000 to decrypt a block to create this equation. I've got a few countries. I thought some of you may be here today from Switzerland, Australia, but I've put the link so you can see that if you're in the UK, it costs about $18,000 to resolve to mine, so to resolve one equation. And a Bitcoin is worth £9,000. Okay, so that means that at the moment, if you're in the UK, it's not really worth it to mine Bitcoins or try to resolve this equation, because you're going to spend a lot more. Well, not a lot more, because you would get 25 Bitcoins, but it's still not as good as in other countries. So what you're starting seeing is companies in countries where it's cheap buying computer farms, and that's all they do. they mine cryptocurrencies. It's quite a strange thing, but that's one of the reasons. Is, as I said, because it's a ledger, everyone who wants to trade in Bitcoin need to have the whole ledger, the whole database on their machine. So you download the file, and the file is 170 gig. Okay, it's quite a really big file, and it's growing. So I haven't put the graph, but you can see how it's growing because every transaction is recorded. So what it means in summary is that Bitcoin is not really eco-friendly because it requires so much power to confirm a transaction. So that's one issue. The other issue is it takes a long time. I think now it takes between 15 to 20 minutes to validate a transaction. So imagine going to a shop and wanting to buy in Bitcoins. Well, it will take 20 minutes for your transaction to be validated. So that's the issue with this concept of proof of work. Okay? So there are other ways of confirming that a blockchain transaction, a new record added to the ledger, is valid. So one of them is proof of stake. So this works slightly differently. So basically, you need to have some ownership. You have to have some shares of some sort. So let's say you've got a new cryptocurrency, or you create a blockchain and you give 3% of the blocks to someone. This miner will only be able to mine the percentage that they own. So you don't make as much money, but it's a lot faster. So I'll talk about Ethereum later, but Ethereum is the framework that's open source that is supporting blockchain. So Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is installed on a framework called Ethereum. Because of the cost of electricity and the fact it's not sustainable, they are planning to move to proof of stake. So to mine Bitcoins, you will need to own already a number of Bitcoins. So you won't be able to invest as much. Then you've got the proof of elapsed time. So this one, despite its poetic name, is a bit more complex to understand. So this is basically, you would have a random algorithm, and one person who, basically the person is selected randomly to solve this equation. But you don't know who is selected. So you've got a number of people who will try to solve the problem, but you don't know who's been authorized to do it. So you can't say, I'm going to solve it. You don't know. So different people will try. And then it's like a lottery. Who's going to be attributed the validation of the ledger? This is this one, the proof of authority, is probably easier and more logical. Basically, you've got people who are on the network, on the blockchain, who are authorized by the person setting up the ledger of the product, the blockchain, will give people rights to validate a transaction. So this is the one, as you will see, that's used by mostly companies who want to use blockchain. So there are different types of blockchain. So again, blockchain is the concept, it's the ledger. You can create your blockchain product on a public network. The public network, the most famous one, is called Ethereum. That's the one that has Bitcoin. That means that anyone with a bit of training, anyone can create a blockchain ledger on a public framework. So there's no permission, so it's completely anonymous. It's never anonymous. You can track people. Basically, you don't need to declare anything. You just go there, you learn the code, you install your blockchain framework and ledger. So it's using a lot of electricity. I'm not going to go into all the detail, but there's a bigger risk of being attacked, because if you've got more than half of the people on there, who are hackers, then they could validate a wrong transaction. But it's quite unlikely to happen. But the big thing here on the public is that it's anonymous, it's using a lot of electricity, it's taking a lot of time, but also because there are many people at the moment who are creating what they call cryptocurrencies, but they're actually tokens. So I need to explain briefly the difference. In a cryptocurrency is like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, there are like 5 different ones, but anyone can create a cryptocurrency. So it's like creating your own money, but your own money needs to be based on Bitcoin or Ethereum. It needs to be based on one of the 5 or 6 valid currencies. So there's a lot of confusion. It's it took me a while to understand, where you may have seen some charities creating their own coin. Yeah.
Who decides which are the valid currencies?
So it's a sort of community. It's at the moment you've got so Bitcoin, and they created another one, I think Lite, Ethereum because it's the network. So usually when you've got your own framework, your own network, you can create a coin because you're the one you've got the infrastructure. So the decision is basically based on, do you own the product, do you own the framework? So then you can create a currency. But anyone can say, okay, I'm going to create my currency, and there's one example called CryptoKitties. So back in December, some people, we don't know who they are, created a token called CryptoKitties. So basically you could buy kittens coins. It was more like a joke, a sort of game. So, because you know that cats are quite popular on the internet. So they created like a virtual money for cats I think it was based on Bitcoin. Now the issue with that, and because it takes a lot of energy, it nearly crashed the network because it got very popular. People bought that for fun, and basically everything stopped to hold. It took a long time to validate transactions. So basically that means in this environment, anyone can create a ledger with everything they want, including cryptocurrency for cats. Okay, so I don't want to spend too long on the public one because I'm not sure, and it's new, so it's a bit like the early days of the internet. We're not too sure where this is going, but I don't think this is the most robust solution. It's a bit like if you have a website hosted on a shared server with lots of people being able to create a website on the same server. That's if you understand hosting solutions, it's a similar concept. So there is another solution, and they are like permissioned or private network. They're exactly the same in the concept, but it means that a consortium would be a blockchain that is set up by an organization or a group of organizations, and I'll show you some examples of that. So it could be that a group of charities get together. So we don't really want to do a public one, not because what we want to do is private. We just don't want everyone to be able to access it because it takes too much power. We want to create a specific ledger just for the charity sector. And obviously our supporters may be able to view transactions and interact with the interface, but we want to keep that just for a group of companies or organizations. So obviously here, you have to be identified and trusted to be able to access it. So there's one that is called Hyperledger, and Hyperledger was set up funded by IBM and set up by the Linux Foundation. So if you want to create your ledger, your blockchain project, or Hyperledger, you need to pay a membership of $10,000. They say if you're a not-for-profit, you can do that for free. But you can see that if you want to create blockchain, this is probably not safer, but a bit more robust because the transaction doesn't take a long time. So it's easier to do that with the consortium. The private one is exactly the same, except instead of having different organizations, it could be just one organization. So I said, when I show you examples, you will see examples of organizations who've done like consortium. I'll show you some public ones and some private ones as well. Okay. So I needed to do all this theory before showing you examples, and because it is something that's quite complex to understand. So what does it do? Then you've got different applications on blockchain. So I've talked about the currency. So that's one thing. And because many people focus on that, because Bitcoin is what people wrote about because of all the money you could make when you invested. But actually, as you will see later, there are more opportunities, including crowdfunding. So you could set up a project on blockchain and say, I need money to, I don't know, open a school, and then people will give you the money directly. Same for peer-to-peer lending. So you could, on the ledger, on blockchain, set up a microfinance product. And then you would bypass the bank. People would, through blockchain, validate your transaction, and you would get the money directly. I'm not going to talk about securities. That's more for like finance companies. So there aren't that many examples in our sector, except for crowdfunding. But the biggest one is smart contracts. So I'll explain how smart contracts work, because for me, this is really the most important thing about blockchain, about those modules, about the way it works. It's that it works with smart contracts. So I'll explain what they are in a minute. And obviously the record keeping. So at the moment there are lots of articles about healthcare, how those records could be secured on blockchain, voting systems, and there's a lot of work. Well, there are a few articles about DAO, decentralized autonomous organization. So that's an interesting concept. But one thing about blockchain is a lot has to be invented. So it's a concept where an organization has no management. All the decisions are made by validating a transaction. They sort of vote, anonymous vote. But I haven't seen an example yet. So the thing I want to talk about is really the smart contracts, because then you will understand the power of blockchain. So in traditional contract, let's say you want to rent this cool flat. I think there's probably some rooms behind it. But if you want to buy or rent a place, what you need to do is basically to have a number of people involved. Lawyers in France, you have notaire, you have to negotiate, you've got a contract. So usually a traditional contract between a company and a supplier involves a negotiation. So it can take a long time. So smart contracts, actually they're called blockchain smart contracts, but they're actually not smart, and they're actually not contracts, but they're called smart contracts. So what they are is basically, it's a piece of code that says, if this happens, then do that. So that's why I put like this vending machine, because basically here, the equation is, if I put the right coin, I turn and I'll get a reward. Smart contracts were exactly like that. You don't have intermediaries. Okay? When you create this smart contract, you write the piece of code to say, if this happens, then transfer the money or add a record to the ledger. So this is the most important thing for me. This is really the core function of blockchain, those smart contracts. So, right. So this is how they work. So you create a contract with someone. So you say, okay, we've got this agreement, and you write that in the code. When the event happens, the money can be transferred or the record updated automatically. So I will give you an example of a project that I haven't got here because as a case study, because it's just a concept. But I'm working with an international charity, and I'm actually going to Kenya at the end of the month to see how it could work. let's say there is a disaster somewhere in the world. You've got a smart contract with a farmer to feed your volunteers. So you're sending your charity volunteers. Normally what would happen is, let's say the farmer will feed your volunteers or your staff. He will raise an invoice, and it could take a long time to be paid. You could have a smart contract to say, as soon as you feed our volunteers, one of our staff member will validate that. It will go onto blockchain. The transaction will be validated, and instantly you receive money in your wallet. The reason it's still conceptual is that then what do you do with the wallet? It's great to have cryptocurrencies or crypto coins, but how do you actually buy something with that? So that will be the future. But for now, you can see how this would work. So it could be that you want to buy a house, or let's say rent. It's probably a better example. Every month, you have to pay your rent. As soon as it's the end of the month, the money is taken, and if you don't have the money, then it could block the flat. So there are some. Basically, what is being removed is the intermediary, and it's instant. So we'll talk more about smart contracts maybe during the workshop, because you may have some creative ideas about how to use smart contracts. So this is an example if you want to sell a house or buy a house. So instead of having many people in the middle, you would need, that's why it's so conceptual, you would need everything to be on blockchain. So you could have the land registry is on blockchain, so you don't have to check. You can automatically check that this person owns the house this person who's selling owns the house that they want to buy. Then it will instantly know that you've got the money to buy the house. So it could save time, and it could save money in intermediary fees. So let's look at what it looks like. So this is a platform. I mentioned Hyperledger. This is a company called Teamlace, and a UK-based company, and they create blockchain solutions. So this is the dashboard where you can create your smart contracts. I'm not going to go into the detail of that. That's just to show you how it works, because I will go through that in a minute when I show you the case studies. But I wanted to show you visually. It looks a bit like a CRM or any backend of a CMS. Okay, so this is a tool to create blockchain contract. So I know this is quite abstract. So what I want to do now is to show you examples of blockchain solution what's been used. Okay. So this is just to say that when I spoke to Ruth about coming here today, that was a few months ago, I was really hoping to be able to show a project I'd worked on. And today I feel like a real consultant that's talking to you about something that I haven't experienced, I don't have hands-on experience. I'm working on 3 projects, they're all under development. So I can't show you a project I have worked on that, today. But obviously I'm going to show you projects that I've seen, and I'll give my opinion on some of them. So let's start with the cryptocurrency. So a few months ago, I've seen something called Giftcoin. So it's quite something you hear quite a lot. You know, the charity model is broken. People don't want to give to charities anymore. So instead of giving to a charity, you buy those coins, okay, and then a charity will put their project, and then you can give your coins to this company, will then give the money to the charity. So it's an interesting concept, but I didn't quite get it. Because why would you, if the model is broken, if you don't trust the charity, why would you trust the company that's brand new? I mean, I know this is Livestream, it's maybe quite controversial, but I didn't really understand. I don't know, some of you in the UK may know about Just Giving, or I think if you're in Sweden, there's something called Better Now. It's like basically a peer-to-peer platform where you can give money directly to charities. For me, this is like recreating something that already existed. So I didn't really see the benefit of buying a virtual coin, especially if you've bought Bitcoin. It takes quite a long time. So why would you do that instead of giving to a charity you trust? I don't know. So I was quite skeptical. And then also to buy those, what they call the gift coin, on their website, it says that you need to earn about £100,000 a year. So you need to be quite a high value donor. So I was skeptical, and actually they recently announced that they were postponing the sale. So so I don't know, maybe they didn't have a business model. So that's just to say there are quite a few concepts that are just that, concepts. So if you want to get into blockchain, you really need to have a strong reason for doing it. I think trying to create a new just giving on blockchain, I don't really see the point yet. It may work in the future. And I'll talk about tracking the impact as a case study. computer transaction, or your computer power, to validate a series of transactions, but instead of getting the money goes to a charity. So there are some similar projects like this one, where you can use your computer to then help cure cancer. So for example, so this one is to use your computer power to resolve equations, to resolve mathematical equations. But that, again, has existed outside blockchain. I remember NASA did that years ago with screensavers. But this is on blockchain. That means you can access the ledger. Another example is Kudo. So this is another UK project. So it's something similar. So you're using your desktop, the power of your desktop, to then use the electricity, the power, to then fund some project. So what you can get £30 a month when you use your computer power. So this is a very, very interesting project. I wish I had worked. So I did a project with World Food Programme on their fundraising strategy a few years ago before they did that. So the World Food Programme and the UN in general are really, really keen to use blockchain. So they invested a lot of money on blockchain. So this is a case study you can read online. So they've done two things. So this one, basically, they've decided to use cryptocurrency to pay staff and to transfer money in different countries. So what they're saying here, you can probably read, but they're going to save millions and millions of dollars in bank fees. So that's a very, very practical use. Like, because the UN or even global charities have to send money to different countries. And I remember a few years ago, I was doing a podcast and I interviewed the director of MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, and he was telling me how they were working, looking at the best exchange rate to transfer money and pay people in the field. So field staff maybe pay 1 month by the UK budget, but if the exchange rate was stronger in Germany, they were paid by Germany to save money on exchange rate. So what the World Food Programme have decided to do is to bypass banks and transfer money directly to using a crypto wallet to field staff. They've also done a very, very interesting pilot in a refugee camp. So in refugee camps, initially you've got paper vouchers. So if you're a refugee, they give you paper vouchers that will allow you to buy food and clothes and all the things that you need. So what they've piloted is using blockchain and eye scan. So refugees were given a crypto wallet, eye scanning, and no paper vouchers. So basically that would limit fraud, because some people could steal your vouchers or you could resell them on the black market. So what happens with this refugee camp is when you go to a shop, they will scan your eye and they will know what you're entitled to purchase. Again, it could be done with any system, but the reason they use blockchain is because the technology is available and it's easy to set up. So it's sort of smart contract. You arrive, they scan your eye, they check what you got in your wallet, you take the product, scan it, and then on the ledger you can see exactly how your money is being used. So that's a good product. This is not from the charity sector. The reason I want to show you this is because I think something like this would be useful for the charity sector. So company have created Everledger. So it's a blockchain for diamonds. So when you buy a diamond in a shop, you can see exactly if it's ethical, where it's coming from. So you can actually, there's a demo on their website, so you can see how it works. When you buy your diamond, you can trace it back to the origin, and you can see an image of the rough diamond. And then you can see I don't really know, that's not my industry, but you could see basically all the different steps, crafted, groomed, you could groom a diamond, but basically you could see that your diamond is ethical. So there's a similar concept that can be used for fish. And WWF New Zealand have piloted something like this. So you're in a restaurant and you want to buy a fish. Then you can see on which market the fish was bought, so basically up to when the fish was caught. So the way it works is when they catch a fish, they put a tag on it, they write it on a ledger, so the tag doesn't obviously contain a currency, but it contains the temperature, the time, maybe the weight of the fish, all sorts of information. So it's tagged, so then you can see how long it's been on the ship, different markets, so you can track everything, and the demo basically looks like this. It's not the most exciting bit visually, but imagine that you're a charity. What I'd like to see, and again it's just conceptual, it's the other way around. What I would like to see is I make a donation, and I could see how my donation is spent. So I could see exactly how my donation is spent. Now, there's something at the moment about transparency. I don't have the proof or the evidence that donors care that much about they want to know their money is put to good use, but I don't know if they would track it. So that's one challenge. The other challenge for charities is it's going to be very difficult. If someone gives £20, say, well, your £20 was used to pay staff salary, because obviously we need to be paid. So if a charity wanted to do something like that, internally it's quite complex. They would probably have to split the donation into small bits. So let's say you give $20, you could create your own internal currency, not necessarily promoting it to the donors, but say, okay, we're going to split the $20 donation into bits of $1. And then we put that across our work. So then you could see that one of your $1, 1% of your donation, let's say if you get $10, 1% was used to pay for staff, 5% were used to deliver food. So you could do something like that. But at the moment, is there a need in the market? I don't know. Another use that's probably better, I was talking to a small charity who work a lot in Africa, and they get grants from something like Comic Relief. So basically they get funders who give them a grant, and they have to justify every cent that they're spending. But it's very difficult when you work in developing countries. That I was told that creates like a climate of suspicion when you need to ask for receipts for everything. But you could use something like that. So we've got this new system. Every time you spend some of the grant we're giving you, you can scan or put the receipt. So then to report back, you'll be able to show exactly where and how much we spent. So I think for me the opportunities are more internal than external. So this is I've got a few more cases. This one is in Brooklyn. So if you've got a solar panel, you can use blockchain to sell electricity to your neighbors. So it's like sharing electricity, reselling electricity, bypassing energy companies. So that's quite an interesting concept. You can sell that directly to your neighbors. And obviously, here blockchain provides the secure framework to do that. This was an interesting one that I've seen in March. Sierra Leone became the first country in the world to use blockchain technology to verify voting in an election. So there's quite a bit of news about that, about a country using blockchain to check the ledger, to check if people were allowed to vote, and check the election to check that there was no fraud. Except, very soon after this was announced, the National Electoral Commission of Sierra Leone put a tweet to say, we're using a C++ database running on MS on Microsoft SQL, neither of which are open source, and we do not use blockchain. So what is interesting is actually the company who promoted that, based in Russia. I think that's just anecdotal. But be aware of fake news. So at the moment, it's so trendy to talk about blockchain that you will have, yes, it would be possible to do something like that, but that just didn't happen. So that's why initially I find it quite difficult to talk about case studies, because you have to research to see if it actually happened. This is a new project. So I'm working with this organization, soon to be a charity, called Promise 2030. So what they want to do, in summary, It's TripAdvisor.
very challenging. And I think, for example, about record keeping, it's your personal data. This is a very stupid question, maybe, but how does this relate to the general data protection law regulations in the EU that's coming into effect in May or this month, actually?
So GDPR obviously is about contacting people. Now, even if the ledger is public, it's encrypted. So I didn't want. I had a screen grab of what it looks like, but basically it's a series of 16, 20 of random numbers and letters. So it's transparent in the sense it's shared, but you can't read it. It's all encrypted. To read the data, you need the private key and the public key. So so that's sorry.
But for example, if I read the GDPR, it doesn't really talk about encryption, but it talks about where the data are stored. So we don't have any control about where the data storage unit is, in that because it's decentralized. So how can we comply with GDPR? I mean, I really think the technology is very good, but I think the law we have doesn't really cover the situations.
Well, it could be that on the ledger you don't store contact details, for example. It could be an ID number, it could be a transaction, but at the moment I haven't really read any articles, so I need to do a bit of research. That's a new area. But the EU have invested quite a lot of money, so this is my limit for the microphone. They invested a lot of money in testing blockchain, so I'm sure there's a response somewhere, but I have to admit I've got to do some research on that.
Following up on that, how would it work that you have a right that all your data is deleted? That's also new with the new law that's starting this month. How do you make sure that all your data is actually deleted? Because that's what you have to prove as an enterprise who works with data.
So how would you prove it?
If I'm an enterprise and I use data, put it in a blockchain, and you said like data can't be lost, it can't be overwritten. So how do I prove that I actually deleted personal data, which I'm forced to do by the law?
So I think all that is around the encryption, and maybe the sort of data you store. So I need to do some research on that, because I'm sure that I've done research about how the data can be stored.
I'm stepping out from GDPR and asking, are there any alternatives for bitcoins? Because bitcoins are a little bit tricky to handle. Are there any trustworthy initiatives from states or from banks?
Well, banks, it's interesting. The banks are investing quite a lot of money in blockchain because they see that it's going to disrupt the industry the same way the traditional internet disrupted music. So I don't know if I want an answer. Basically, there are Bitcoin, ATH, so Ethereum's, Litecoin, there are 4 or 5. But the question is more, why do you need to buy cryptocurrency? Because at the moment, initially I bought some cryptocurrencies. Actually, I didn't invest a lot. So it was really to test and see how complex it was. But it was just to try. I haven't really used the money yet. So at the moment, I think if you want to invest to make money, you should invest in all the ones available. But if not, then my advice would be to wait and see what currencies is being used. This is a bit like the early days of the internet, where you could host your website in different places. You had to use Internet Explorer, do a website for Internet Explorer, do a website for Firefox, or you could choose AOL or CompuServe. This is really, really early days. So, I can send you some links about articles about cryptocurrency. This is not my main area of interest. So.
Well, I don't know if cryptocurrency, just electronic, for instance, making an equal payment method of electronic pounds that could be used for transactions in blockchains. instead of
yeah. So it's probably so you've got different options. So either you use a currency like Bitcoin, Ethereum may be a bit more robust. If you want to use a public one, or you create your own token. Let's say it's a private, you want like a private network, then you can create a smart contract, which is basically based on generating an invoice instead of using cryptocurrency. So at the moment, it's still too new to have the answer to that.
One last question about Save the Children. Can anyone apply for this humanitarian passport? So I mean, I can apply for a passport and then I can use it for...
Yes, on a very fundamental level, this very much looks like the old system of obligations and private checks that anyone can, I think, in most countries still is able to issue, where you promise to pay the person who has got the piece of paper in hand at a fixed date later on, and it may be confirmed along the way by different persons, by their signature. It could be sent to other people. But the problem with that system was, do you actually trust the issuer if the issuer is not a bank or some organization that you trust? And the other thing is somebody needs to endorse it before you get the payout. Isn't it just the same fundamental problems that you have with this blockchain system? You have to trust the issuer. There needs to be some kind of value somewhere in the system that's not just zeros and ones, and you need somebody to testify that it can be turned out into another medium, such as money, for instance.
So if it's easier if it's like a private or consortium blockchain, because then you would not invite participants unless you knew them, they were trusted. If it's a public one, that's why at the moment you've got this thing about the proof of work and the proof of stake, but the money's there and can only move across if the transaction is validated by more than half of the participants. So that's at the moment. That's why I think a private one, where you invite trusted participants, would work. But because it's anonymized, so it's all encrypted, you only validate a transaction through a computer. The trust is done basically by a computer. So yeah. But so I think in a way it's solving that problem by using a computer equation to validate the transaction and to solve this problem or this challenge of trust.
You explained how within an African state could use a cryptocurrency instead of actual currency. How does that translate into actually?
Well, that's at the moment, that's why I said it's really a concept. I think there is an opportunity there, but that's not going to happen right now because that's exactly the problem. So basically at the moment, there is no proof that they get the money when they're being paid. See, the charity will give the money. It's quite controversial, and it's live stream, but you can imagine that it may be that that's not them ultimately having control of their money. But so there's a form of empowerment by a crypto wallet. For that to work, then there needs to be something happening in that country. So you can use, a bit like in the refugee camp in the WFP program, your crypto wallet will allow you to buy food, because at the moment that's exactly the problem. Yes, you can have your crypto wallet. It's not going to help you buy bread. So this is why currently this is a concept, and it's going to happen maybe in 5 to 10 years. But you know, when I first heard about the mobile payment PESA in Africa, I was quite surprised because they didn't have smartphones and they've been transacting with mobile for more than 10 years. So it could happen because that's been done in countries without currency.
And could you connect these two systems so that they could actually use the cryptocurrency being transferred to their phone payment system, because that's actually how they can buy stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could do that. I mean, it's a piece of technology. So for that, it could be done by SMS, smartphone, different codes, iScanner. But I think it's, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, let's say, maybe more. That's why at the moment my frustration is that I see all those case studies and I see issues with a lot of them, because many of them are not fixing a problem, and that's going to be the workshop. They'll be about you trying to fix a problem. They are improving maybe something, but I haven't seen a fundamental problem apart from maybe the diamond, the trustability. This is a real problem at the moment. So this is probably the only case study I've seen that, and obviously the one from the international NGO that are solving a problem. Yes.
Back in the 19th century, there were mill workers and mill created where that very system created. I wasn't there, so I can't remember how it closed or how the system broke down. But the mill worker had their workers, gave them housings, gave them a ticket system, a funding system, and the whole process benefited the mill owner. And the demise of it happened with the mills closing, but the system, there's some very good case studies in the 19th century.
But that's also why, to explain blockchain, I thought I looked at the database, like the old database system, because I don't think there's anything revolutionary about it.
The learnings are similar.
I mean, we're using technology to do the same thing. I completely agree. So I'll do some research on that. Sounds interesting.
Okay, one more question, and then we should go for coffee.
My question is, all you have shown us is a matter of trust. I mean, also the diamonds can be fake, factor, and the fish also. So what is your comment on that? In the outer world, I mean, with the currency, you call for more and more public people to go and see if they are speaking the truth with the fact and the documentation. Is that an issue inside of this? Because trust is a good thing, but you are often deceived.
Well, for the diamonds, so I've read the case study and I spoke to a friend of mine who work on a system like this. So the person, so when you can see the person who cut the diamond, that's not them recording. It's they announce it. It's validated by a third party that can check, or it could be validated by a number of third parties. So what you do when you create a smart contract, depending on the transaction. So for example, it was to sell the diamond, to resell the diamond. There's already a trace, and it could be that someone you trust. So it could be you say this transaction needs to be validated by 3 independent people. When the diamond is cut in the mine, that could be okay. Here we want 15 independent people to assess the validity. So all that can be created in a smart contract. So until you've got this number of validation, the contract is not executed. It's not written on the ledger. So it could be that the number of trusted parties. And again, this is not, with this diamond example, it's not a public network, a public blockchain. It's we only invite, and well, in industry, you only invite trusted suppliers. So if you find damage to the algorithm, you can't join the ledger. There's an application process. So it's within a trusted group, already a trusted group of people. That's why I think there are more opportunities in the consortium for private blockchain than a public one, when this could remain a problem. If you've got a large group of people who want to create a free ledger, they can do it. And that's been happening with some cryptocurrencies. There are some papers saying, well, don't buy this cryptocurrency because it's not valid, it's not the company behind it are fraudsters. Okay? Great. Yeah.
Well, there was one thing we also wanted to do before going into the coffee break, is to say welcome to the people who have joined us today, because today is the day that the conference is opening up to one-day participants. People who could have the time for